in Queensland's southeast, Townsville, Palm Island and Magnetic Island. It comes after 2 new local coronavirus cases were detected, including a 19-year-old unvaccinated hospital worker who travelled from Brisbane to North Queensland. Both cases have the highly contagious Delta variant. Across the rest of the country, 19 new cases were recorded in New South Wales, with all but 2 directly linked to the current outbreak. Darwin recorded 2 new local infections on day 2 of its citywide lockdown. And in WA, no new cases have been detected as residents in Perth and Peel begin their 4-day lockdown. The AMA says the decision to allow all adults to get the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine marks a significant change in the nation's rollout. Last night, the Prime Minister opened up access to the jab, which had previously been restricted to those over the age of 60. Anyone wanting AstraZeneca is being advised to consult their GP. The AMA says Pfizer is still the preferred option for those under 60. And Melbourne will become home to all but 2 AFL clubs as the league tries to get ahead of coronavirus outbreaks around the country. Teams from both WA and Queensland are flying into Victoria, with some players told to pack for an extended stay. 2 games that were scheduled to be played interstate will now move to Victoria, while Tasmania could be in line to host more matches. Let's take a closer look at which parts of Australia are locked down tonight. Large parts of Queensland's east coast have just entered a 3-day snap lockdown. The restricted area stretches from Townsville through Brisbane down to the Gold Coast and Scenic Rim. Greater Sydney, the Central Coast, Blue Mountains and Wollongong are all under stay-at-home orders until Friday the 9th of July. In the Northern Territory, a lockdown is in place for the Greater Darwin, Palmerston and Litchfield areas until 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And in Western Australia, the Perth and Peel regions are isolated from the rest of the state for another 3 days. As you've just heard, 4 Australian capital cities are in lockdown tonight, as more than 90% of Australians are yet to be fully vaccinated. As much of the world reopens, the federal government still hasn't set vaccination targets or explained how the country can reopen to the world once the population is vaccinated. To discuss this further, we're joined by Professor Tony Cunningham, an infectious diseases physician from the Westmead Institute for Medical Research. Professor Cunningham, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us tonight. Does Australia need to consider a roadmap out of the pandemic and set some goals for what COVID normal will look like?
I think we certainly need to set goals for immunisation. I think that the current outbreaks of the Delta variant, I think we've got a lot of people quite concerned, and we're seeing more people interested in being immunised than previously. We do know there's a bit of an upsurge in interest in April, and then perhaps there might have been a falling off since. We do know in India that 90% of people are interested in being immunised because of the proximity of the coronavirus. Complacency, unfortunately, leads us to become less interested in vaccines. So we do need goals. We need to aim for 80% and upwards.
Yeah, the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian wants to see 10 million vaccines administered in the state before she can rule out further lockdowns. Do we need more of that?
Indeed, it's our way out, and the Delta strain has made life even more difficult because it's so much more spreadable. It's not less susceptible to the vaccines. The good news is that if you're fully immunised, then 90% there's a 90% efficacy with both vaccines 2 weeks after the second dose. So that's really good news. And the answer is very clear. We need to all be immunised as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we run the risk of further Delta strain outbreaks. This virus can get out of quarantine a lot more easily than its predecessors.
Yeah, and we've seen that occur most recently in Queensland. What about those who are fully vaccinated? I mean, at this point, there's no extra freedoms for people who are fully vaccinated. Should that change at some point down the track?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons about that is that people have been concerned about asymptomatic infection, that you've got a morass of virus around you, that you may still be asymptomatically infected and pass it on. But there's good news, and that is the more recent field studies have shown 70 to 90% effectiveness, as we call it, in the field against asymptomatic infection. So certainly we should be considering the possibility of offering incentives to people to be immunised. And some of those incentives may be a little more freedom, not locking down for the whole of 2 weeks quarantine, for instance.
And we've seen with the example in this latest outbreak in Sydney, the party that was held in West Hoxton, the 6 healthcare workers who were fully immunised that were at that party have continued to test negative, while others, a significant amount of them, have tested positive who attended that party.
So I think that's also very exciting, isn't it? It's a practical demonstration of what we've seen overseas with the effectiveness studies that I just referred to. I think there were 6 fully immunised people and none of them were infected, whereas the 14 people who had not been immunised were infected with the virus. I think that's really an important local demonstration of the importance of being immunised. That's our way out of this, and the quicker we can do it, the better it is, because we don't want even newer and more spreadable strains than Delta to arise worldwide. And again, that's an indication of the importance of worldwide immunisation. Today I was on a meeting with ASEAN representatives, and this was emphasised time and again, the importance of getting immunisation of the whole of Southeast Asia and the world.
When do we start talking about allowing returning Australians who are fully vaccinated with, say, a vaccine that's approved for use in Australia to avoid hotel quarantine and maybe quarantine at home?
Well, I think that's a very important point I think you made, an approved vaccine. We really do need to be sure that such people are fully immunised and will, in fact, have the same protection that I alluded to before, 70 to 90% protection against asymptomatic infection, against spread. We need to ensure that they truly are immunised. So the concept of a validated immunisation passport may become very important. It certainly is going that way in Europe, and I think that ultimately we may go that way too.
We've got the state governments in Queensland and Victoria talking about wanting to accept fewer returned travellers. Is that un-Australian?
I think obviously the Delta strain is really making everybody nervous, and the fact that it can get out of quarantine, that we have gaps in our defences. We don't have all of our airport personnel immunised. We don't even have all of our aged care personnel immunised, although I understand that'll probably be the case in a few weeks' time. And we don't have our aged care workers immunised as well. So I can understand the concerns and the fears that hotel quarantine doesn't seem to be holding up as well with the Delta strain as it has with other strains as well. I think those are the facts, and obviously we've got differing opinions between different premiers. So the New South Wales Premier does not feel that way.
Tony Cunningham, always good to get your expert analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Corinne.
The lack of vaccine supply is still affecting the most vulnerable people. Health workers trying to get Indigenous Australians immunised say they don't have enough shots. And there's concern many First Nations people are hesitant to get the jab. Indigenous Affairs correspondent Isabella Higgins has more.
This community in far north Queensland has been trying to keep coronavirus out. The challenge they face now is to get the vaccine in.
We haven't had much Pfizer to go around, and that until recently, that's mainly been in these hubs in the cities that a lot of high-risk populations haven't been accessing.
Jason Agostino has been an advisor on the rollout to remote communities around Australia.
When it was relying on the AstraZeneca vaccine, we were pretty confident that we'd have most people vaccinated before winter came.
The vaccine rollout at this health service in Mildura had a successful start. In Victoria, vaccination rates for Indigenous adults are higher than the general population.
I decided to get vaccinated to protect myself and my friends and family.
So I could feel better protected within our community and make other people feel safe.
But doctors say concerns about AstraZeneca have slowed progress.
That has definitely generated some doubts in our community's mind whether to go for it or not. So it has been a bit uphill battle, to be honest.
The government says 16% of Indigenous adults have received their first dose. That's lower than what anyone would like. But the bigger concern is that some health workers believe in remote communities that could be as low as 1%. After the recent outbreaks in Queensland and in the Northern Territory, Indigenous health services are feeling extra pressure.
Our bookings for appointments for vaccinations is really under the pump at the moment.
A little bit of a sting, huh?
There's hope new shipments of Pfizer landing in Aboriginal health clinics soon will speed things up.
I think the big message is people need to get vaccinated. We're trying the best we can with the limited supplies that we have available.
The Federal Minister for Indigenous Australians has promised to ramp up messaging and resources for communities. Isabella Higgins, ABC News.
For millions of people, lockdown drags on and you might notice yourself feeling more stressed and anxious than usual. But there are some easy ways to look after your mental health while staying at home.
We've heard again and again how bad lockdowns can be for our mental health. Right now, millions of people are being told to stay at home. So what are some signs that we're struggling and what can we do about it?
While some people feel they might cope really well, other people can have a really difficult time. They can be more stressed, feeling more anxious or even more irritable than normal.
Associate Professor Jill Newby from the Black Dog Institute has come up with an easy checklist to help look after your mental health at this time. At the top, staying connected with others.
Just having a small chat each day and reaching out to the people that care for you and that are supportive can make a real difference.
Next, thinking about what's in your control and what's not.
If you're finding that you're doom scrolling or transfixed by the media and all the negative news, switch off, curate your settings.
Looking after your body is another tip. That means getting a good night's sleep, eating healthily, drinking less alcohol and exercise. Maybe go for a walk. That's good news for you, isn't it? Managing anger and frustrations and setting boundaries around work is also recommended during lockdown. And here's the really important bit. If things are becoming too much, seek support. There are many organisations which can help. You can call them, but if you don't want to do that, you can also get in touch with them online.
We've got dedicated coronavirus counsellors ready to take your call or to have a chat with you online.
Easy things you can do to make lockdown a little better. Jonathan Hare, ABC News, Sydney.
It's no secret there's a wide gulf between the wealth of private and public schools in Australia. A recent joint investigation by The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald found the top 50 private schools in Australia are worth about $8.5 billion. It's also been revealed a number of elite schools drew on the government's JobKeeper payment. The Drum's Ruby Cornish has more.
This week, The Guardian revealed that many high-fee private schools across the country took advantage of the federal government's JobKeeper subsidy. It estimates they've raked in hundreds of millions of dollars in COVID funding designed to support the not-for-profit sector. At least one school lowered tuition fees for parents as a result, and posted a surplus of more than $2 million at the end of 2020.
This is only one of a number of flows of funds that non-government schools are very good at getting access to. There was JobKeeper, there's also the cash flow boost that they receive.
Barker College in Sydney says it chose not to access JobKeeper, despite more than 100 families reporting significant financial hardship.
I think it's for each school to consider its circumstances and needs in conscience. Our view was that at a conscience level, with the whole nation sharing in some pretty difficult times, and those times have continued to some extent into 2021, that we would not go in that direction ourselves.
The financial position of our private school sector is back under the spotlight. A joint investigation by The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald has found the top 50 private schools in the country are worth a combined $8.5 billion, and in 2019 posted a surplus of nearly $400 million. The Shaw School in Sydney alone is worth nearly $500 million. As well as making an income from government funding, school fees, private donations, capital funding investments and one-off payments like JobKeeper, private schools are exempt from paying tax and between 2015 and 2019 accumulated assets at a greater rate than the property market or the stock exchange. Despite that, private schools get more taxpayer dollars than universities, and government funding for non-government schools is growing at a faster rate than for public ones.
If you look at the recent federal budget, the Commonwealth spending on private schools increases by 29% over the forward estimates. For public schools, it increases by 26%.
There are some worrying signs about the standards of our education system.
In 2011, the Gonski Review proposed major changes to Australia's complicated school funding arrangements to make them more consistent, equitable and needs-based. But implementing those changes has been slow and stilted. The Public Education Foundation says non-government schools shouldn't receive any new government funds until public schools are in a better position.
This is an issue of very, very effective lobbying, very, very powerful interest groups who manage to extract significant flows of public funds into private schools. This is at a time when students in public schools face, deep and growing disadvantage at the bottom end.
Those on the other side of the fence say all schooling options deserve government support.
It is the responsibility of the nation to educate its children. Parents make an after-tax decision to contribute to that education for themselves as a matter of their choice.